Well, we are on the edge, the banks of the River Parrett. These are some of the fortifications that have been dumped here by heavy lifting gear. Inside, actually, not sand, but the local soil. And I'll just grab a hold of a bit of it to illustrate a point that needs making. This is the local soil, very clean soil. And of course, what that does, and you can see it, well, if you could feel it as I am, you'll realise it's got a consistency that suggests this is something which is highly saturated and can keep holding the water. That's one of the big problems they've got. Once it's wet, the local soil here, it stays saturated, it keeps wet, and of course it's a massive problem for the drainage, and it will take weeks, if not months, to fully drain away. And watching the water levels here and listening to the gripes of locals, justified or otherwise, the MP for Bridgewater. A very good morning to you. It's your regular Saturday morning slot, it seems, but you've got a lot to say. What did you make of what happened this week? You've had VIP visits. What did they achieve?
Well, I think the Prime Minister's one was the most important. He actually came down, he did put on his wellies, before you ask. We actually walked through the flood. We went to see some of the farms that are affected. Then we had a private meeting in Bridgewater at Sedgemoor District Council, really to go through. Made it very clear that everything that we've been given, if we want more, we'll get it. Through him, and he said, just call me if we have a problem. The locals, I think, were reassured about that. Chris Smith, another issue. I just was appalled by his behaviour yesterday. He hadn't got the decency to come into Bridgewater. He hadn't got the decency to come and see us. He went to a bird sanctuary, which was a pretty bad start. The arrogance of the man, just, it beggars belief.
Well, he did face repeated questioning from people. At one particular instance, a local person managed to start jabbing a finger in his direction. He also said, look, guys, I know people are desperate to demonise the Environment Agency, but the essential arithmetic is that it's the wettest January on record.
Well, absolutely. We're used to the wet.
No, you're not. You're not. That's the point. You're not used to it being this wet. It's the wettest since 1910.
The problem, we are used to it being this wet in the sense that the rivers here flood from Dorset, across Somerset, up into the Mendip. So we're used to this volume of water. It collects in a vast area. Now, the difference here is that these rivers are 40% below the capacity they should be. If you dug out 40% of this, yes, we'd still have flooding. Of course we would. You're absolutely right. But we wouldn't have it to this level. And the pump systems which are behind me up this river, those pumps, if they were renewed and made properly new electric pumps, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And in fact, this river would be considerably lower now. We cope with water, but we're finding it hard.
No, it's an interesting point, actually. And just over Ian Littlegranger's shoulder, you can see, if our cameraman can just pull it out, there's a pumping station up at Northmoor Green. You can see a spout, a water spout of water. I wonder if you can see that. Just spewing water there into the River Parrett. The pumping station there was installed in 1941. The Spitfires were in the skies above southeast England at that time. That's how old they are. So the technology, you're arguing, needs updating.
Totally. We also need the reams, which are, of course, to us, the ditches, cleaned and kept clean. The internal drainage boards need to be sorted out. But the one thing the Prime Minister did say, which I think is important, that there has to be a fundamental change in thinking to do with the levels. Because if we keep on like this, it is not going to get any better. The climate is changing, we know that, so we're going to have to fight this. So we are having a rethink. The Prime Minister's leading it, and that is obviously welcome.
Yeah. Technology is one thing, pumping stations, all the rest of it. Yesterday, what we saw in the village of Moorland, a couple of miles from here, was the application of good old-fashioned muscle power. And we were talking to one resident in the morning, you know, slight woman of 5'4", who was doing what she could to build these defences around her front door. Sandbags. She was doing daily trips to Wicks to buy breeze blocks, all the rest of it. It was tough for her and her partner. By afternoon, the Marines were in town. They were forming human chains, putting vast numbers, 8,000 sandbags were put down in Moorland yesterday. That should have been happening 4 or 5 weeks ago, shouldn't it?
Well, it's very difficult. As you've seen and you've learned over the last week since you've been down here, this water is unpredictable. We don't know where it's going to come up next. We don't know what it's going to do. If we'd done that, you may have well castigated us for spending the money we shouldn't. It is a balance. It's a dreadfully difficult balance. We have 64 pumps now on this river pumping. The Marines, everybody has been fantastic. The police, everybody. It has been very difficult to forecast this. I mean, I've got threats today, as you're well aware. Gold Command is sitting where we haven't had water before. Now, we know the water is still rising. We just can't tell. So it is a fluid situation, literally. But I can tell you one thing, is that we were not going to give up. You know that. You've seen the resilience of these people. You've said so yourself. We're not walking away from this. This is our homes. This is where we are. This is what we are living in. So we're going to be here for the long term. We've been here since the Roman times. It's when we started this, and we're going to continue the fight.